Lucio Fulci's career took a turn to the perverse in 1969. A crucial early entry into the giallo Perversion story was something of a preview into what the Italian horror film and Fulci's work would become. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So what I particularly like about this film is that it's very much the early days of the giallo, and it's, I guess, us fans of the Italian horror film and by extension the giallo film, we have a very, I think, relatively clear idea of how to recognise one. There might be some debate, right, about all the different things that are required, and by some standards, this wouldn't quite meet it, and I think that's largely because the, say, cliches of the genre that I reckon probably became stronger once Argento started doing it because it was so successful. A lot of the cliches of the genre hadn't exactly been established yet, but in terms of the just general, you know, the sleazy happenings, the perversion of everything that's going on. I think the uncertainty around the sort of the female figures, right? I think a lot of this is very much born out of the film noir, right? I think film hadn't moved away from film noir just by this point, and I think the main character in it is very, very much of that sort of femme fatale type. Or one of the main characters, that femme fatale sort of vibe, shall we say. I think as well that this is less violent, right? There's not a lot of violence going on in this film, and in some ways I think it plays almost more like a Columbo episode or something like that. And, you know, what I love about this film is that the mystery it's barely a mystery, or at least it almost distracts you, I think, quite brilliantly from the revelation that we'll obviously get to as the podcast goes on, but it distracts you from the revelation by almost sort of, I wouldn't say mocking, or tricking, just like the absurdity of this sort of double life of this supposedly dead character that is so obviously, because of the kind of movie you're watching, there's no chance at the end of the film that you're not going to have the revelation that it was the same character the whole time. And just the implication of that, like just how inept and ridiculous the character of George de Maurier is, right? And this is something that obviously I'll talk about next week, or later in the week. Obviously, the scheduling's been a bit up and down with the Christmas period, but how both Jean Sorel characters in this and A Lizard in a Woman's Skin are so like passive and just unable to do anything, right? Like just sort of getting himself into this situation, and really, it's like in both of these films, Jean Sorel, his heart isn't really in the right place, and he almost gets like, well, not just desserts, like a disproportionate punishment, let's say, for his infidelity and just his general ordinariness as a guy. But nonetheless, it's like this film, and possibly the next one as well, are very much, I think, about what's going to happen to the characters, and it doesn't always necessarily have to do with, you know, how will they survive? Will they be stabbed to death by some crazy killer? It's not exactly the type of film that we're dealing with. But what I really like in this and Lizard in a Woman's Skin, as I'll get to, is that they thrust the facts right in front of your face and then pretend like you haven't seen them, right? So we'll get to the plot of the film, I suppose. And so this feels like it is based in America. This feels like an American film, I think, because it's entirely set in San Francisco, and the music right at the very start is very much this sound. It's sort of jazzy, I suppose you'd say, but it's very much, this doesn't quite have the giallo vibe, but I'm happy to call it a giallo because of the mystery and the intrigue and the murder and all kinds of things. So there's lots of really grand shots of San Francisco, the famous bridge and the music, and it's really, really cool. And it's all do 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 do, all that. It's like, it's intriguing, right? It's almost Pink Panther-esque, some of the music in this film, and I liked it right from the beginning. Like, everything is on its face, giving you information that will then be relevant later. So from the start, we see George du Maurier's the publication in the newspaper about they'll be able to perform the first heart transplant soon, and his brother-in-law Henry, or brother-in-law or maybe just younger brother, is having a go at him about that. And I think it's a really effective part of this movie that Henry he's in it enough so it makes sense when you get the revelation, but he's not in it so much that it's obvious that he might be the revelation. I think that's a really difficult balance to find, because obviously in murder mystery or just mystery type things, they always run the risk, in order to make it not too obvious, of it not being like a satisfying revelation, I suppose, when eventually you do get the revelation. But the minimal amount that Henry has to do with the film is always, in hindsight, very significant. Right, like the parts it isn't, it's like, that makes sense. Like, he's genuinely annoyed about George lying, and that's another effective part of this film. And this becomes very, very true in most of Fulci's work, or at least his giallo films beyond this point, is that no one is particularly likable, right? And I think part of the purpose is that everyone is a suspect, right? Everyone is dodgy. And whilst some are more likable than others, that's only in the context of how dislikable everyone else is. And it's an interesting contrast to, say, Argento's gialli at the time, where he generally makes his protagonists really, really likable. And there's a real sort of good versus evil vibe there. Whereas, at least in these initial parts of Fulci's giallo career, if you like, there isn't really a lot of sort of, black gloves and knives and stuff, right? It's like whatever's happening and whatever the evil is very much in the context of the events. It's not someone from outside of that, right? It's like that's why I don't think Perversion Story is the best title that this film has. I think one on top of the other it's even listed on Wikipedia as that, I believe. Sorry, and the Italian Una Salatra, it just sounds a lot cooler. But I think it's very cool that one of the earlier giallo films is known as Perversion Story, because in some ways that is what the giallo is, right? I think that sums it up quite beautifully. So, the reason I think that it's obvious that, the character or the characters played by Marisa Mel, sorry, that they're the same, other than the fact that they're very obviously the same, is that whilst you don't know exactly what ways the film is misleading you at the start, there's something about the framing of these early scenes where we see her, his wife struggling with her health. And then there's that scene with that nurse who I haven't seen you around here before. He shows her the tranquilizers and his wife's medical cabinet, and it's framed from inside the cabinet. It's just like that. You can tell that the film's doing everything it possibly can to make us look at what's going on, but not have any idea what it is, right? So it's calling you to action as a viewer of the film to be like, can you follow these clues, right? And I think that's really, really cool. I don't think it wants to shock us with the result. I think it just wants us to be constantly suspicious, right? And it gives us all the stuff. So she has a go at him about always caring about the clinic and never her. So the thing with this is, as much as I say, like, everyone in this film is poorly motivated, or to one extent or another, I think there's an extent to which every character is like bad and good, right? Pretty much all of them, apart from probably that nurse who's just sort of there, who eventually gets killed. I think she gets killed or she dies or something, but she's just an extra. But like, if you think of George, he's like having an affair and stuff, but at the same time he probably doesn't deserve to be on death row, right? And then there's there's Susan de Maurier, who's like, well, Susan de Maurier / Monica Weston, who is like, well, she's been neglected by her husband, and he's always cared about the clinic, and he doesn't pay any attention to her. But at the same time, she's trying to set him up for murder, and she's probably involved in the murder of that nurse. There's Jane, who's who's our resident Mary Poppins lookalike, who is, she clearly just wants George to herself, and she probably has a right to him to some extent because evidently the marriage isn't going well, and but at the same time she's also having an affair, right? She's also sleeping with a married man, right? Then there's Henry, who's like, he's in many ways inferior to his brother because he just works at the clinic. He doesn't run it or own it and doesn't have all of that money. And in some ways, I think George is a bit of a prick to Henry. But, again, he's also involved in sending him to the gas chamber for something that he didn't do. So this is the nature of the film. This is the nature of the giallo, right? And I love that the film never, and like this film, the giallo film in general, when it's at its peak, I think it doesn't let you trust anyone, and it only half lets you like anyone, right? And I think that's cool because in some ways that's sort of the crux of what makes thrillers and horror films so interesting, that they're always exploring the bad side of human nature, right? And the human heart. And as I say, this film does that very, very well, in my opinion. So, his wife, Susan, was it Susan? Sorry. Yes. Susan is sick. In theory, she's in bed. George is George seems mildly concerned, right? But not really. So he's concerned enough to be worried about the drugs being taken correctly and being administered correctly. But he's also not cared enough to, not have an affair with Jane. So there are some really, really not pornographic but very raunchy sex scenes in this film. Very, very effective. It's very there's a lot of saxophone going on when George is sleeping with Jane. There's that weird shot from underneath where it's like our perspective is from almost like inside the blankets on the bed, which if you think about it is totally ridiculous, but that's cool. And what it does, especially with this music and it being so long and very sensual almost, is I think it gives us this sense that this is quite genuine, definitely from Jane's perspective and maybe in some way George's perspective, right? That, you sort of wish that their relationship could just work itself out, I suppose. But obviously it can't because everything here is a mess. And I think this is, as I say, Perversion Story is a great title. I think one on top of the other is as well. Obviously it has very much it has sexual connotations, but it also has just this one secret on top of the other, one affair on top of the other, right? There can never be clarity in this very unclear world, and you're never going to get that happiness. And that's why I think the ending that I'll talk about at some length, I think, is so great, because it's just so emotionless, right? This world that all these semi-fancy people seem to exist in it's full of lies and deceit and affairs and murder and life's never a mile away from being good, but it feels like it is, right? So there's that really cool, I think it's a really cool scene how, Jane goes on the train, she's going back home, and then George, beats her back there, right? And, he's standing there and she's so excited to see him. He drives all the way to the train station just for this romantic thing. But it's still within the context of this unrealistic romance. But her willingness to be excited by it suggests or reveals that, she's so close to this situation being ideal. And even on the way to the train, I think it's on the way to the train station, that she says in this really methodical way, I'm in love with you. But it's not, there's no feeling there. And I think that's reflective of this idea that, it's the lack of ideal of everything that's going on. It's I'm in love with you, but I don't feel anything about it because I can't feel anything about it because the situation just can't be what it should be. So, eventually George gets a phone call, I think from Henry, about his wife having died. I think they're at some kind of, he's on at a restaurant or something with Jane, and he puts the phone down. She's like, well, what? And it's like, it's Susan. She's dead. And then Jane says, dead. And there's this long scene, and I feel like it's great acting, right? Where they sort of stare at each other, or at least Jane's staring at George, and George is staring either at her or somewhere. And it's like George is trying to figure out whether he actually cares. It's I think he knows that it's sad that she died, but he doesn't seem to care that much. But not even in an evil or cynical way, more just there's an awareness that him and his wife have become so detached. There's also this sense from him that it's a bit of a shock all of a sudden. Well, hang on, I knew she was sick, but she's dead all of a sudden. And there's almost a vibe from Jane that she wants to be happy about it, but it's a bit of a morbid thing to be happy about at the same time. And there's always just this distance, right, that happens. All the characters, they just can't get where they want to get. So this is where some really key things happen. He goes back home, and Susan's sister is there, and he's in there sort of looking at her. There's a distance, right, because as in a physical distance, he doesn't go up to her, and presumably I guess she's sedated herself maybe to the point that she's asleep, or she's just acting very much through this scene. And it's like this is his chance to find out, right? And I think this is an ambitious thing for the film to be doing, because by doing this successfully, they at least confirm the idea that she has died, right? Like, her sister's there, she's crying, or act crying. She's leave us, George, or leave us alone, George, or something. And it's like the insinuation is you don't really deserve to be in the room here because you've neglected her and now she's dead. And because he's so passive and sort of pathetic, he just sort of walks out. But he's seen enough of the situation to confirm that she's dead, so that's all very well and good. And again, like, so much of the stuff that's happening in this early part of the film is like you really, really get the sense that everything that is going on is relevant to the eventual revelation. Like, there's no fluff in these early scenes, and I think that's what's so good about this film. There's almost no fluff in this film at all. I feel it's like everything is there for a reason. And just as a brief aside, I guess I'd like to defend Fulci, who's probably my favourite director, I think. For this perception that he was a bit of a gun-for-hire hack. And I think it's largely because the majority of the fame he got was for his zombie-type stuff, post-zombie flesh eaters, and a lot of that was gore and whatnot. But these three films that will eventually culminate with my genuine favourite film of all time, Don't Torture a Duckling. These three films are so well put together and well directed. Even if the revelations are probably obvious, they're unbelievably well directed. These films, they are three sensational films. They are quite different, I think, to a lot of gialli at the time, but they are great in their own right. So all that happens. George is with, hang on, I'm just trying, I'll look through my notes here just to get clarity, because everything, one on top of the other, everything seems to be all over the place, right? So suddenly they're talking about the insurance policy, that's right. And that's a really effective thing, because I think the film to this point has shown us that Henry doesn't. It's not that he dislikes George; it's that he disapproves of some of his behaviour, right? With the sensationalism around the newspaper stories. So I don't think we suspect him, and when it gets to him revealing himself later in the film, it's so satisfying because he's sort of mocking us as much as he's mocking George, right? Like, you're not going to suspect anything. And part of the effectiveness of that is the way he questions George about the insurance policy. And this has got real... Is it double indemnity, I think? I think it's double indemnity. It's all about insurance policies and stuff. It's got that kind of vibe to it, where Henry's like, you knew nothing about it, George, about the insurance policy. And so suddenly, regardless of the idea that I think we're quite convinced that George didn't know anything about it. But the point is, either George knew about it, right? or he didn't. But either way, either George is a suspect or he's not, but we're not suspecting anything else or anyone else. So Henry is enough in the film to be like, well, we know he disapproves, but all the attention is away from him, to the point that when I first watched this, I actually was a little bit surprised, right? Because it's so effective, I think, towards the end when they make the revelation, because it totally makes sense, but at the same time, it wasn't obvious to note, even in hindsight, I don't think. So that's quite a skill, I think, and it's a skillfully put together movie. So I think that what would you say? So the giallo film is probably noted for its scenes of spectacle, and they're often sexual or they're often violent. This film doesn't have violent spectacles that are particularly good or noteworthy, but the sexual ones are very noteworthy, and it's largely because of the way the music works with it, and because of the context of what's happening. So we enter into the absurd aspect of the film now. So George and Jane are at a restaurant somewhere, and George gets a call. I think he lies to Jane about what it is, but it tells him to go to this very, what would you say, probably kitsch sort of nightclub, I guess, called the Roaring Twenties. And there's a lot of naked women walking around and bouncing around and sort of flouncing around and swinging around even in this really, really bizarre club, right? And it's like I don't really know what to make of this scene. It is very, very funny. I suppose that's how topless bars were back in the 60s or late 60s. I don't know. So he's there, just there, and see, this is one of the strategies I think the film uses to just not allow us to like, trust, or particularly care about George. And again, as I'll get to, it does this in Lizard and Woman's Skin as well in the next podcast. That it's only revealed after this scene why George was there. So he's at this dinner with Jane at this fancy restaurant, and he goes to this bar club thing with topless women, and it's not made clear why he's there at all. He's just there. He's just literally, like, from our perspective, it feels like he's just got bored of dinner with Jane and thought, I'll just not tell her what I'm doing. I'm just going to go to a topless bar and just sit there and not even particularly seem to enjoy myself, just be there, right? And it's like, this is just what George is. So by the time we're revealed why he was actually there, because he got a tip off, it's not really... It's already seeped into our mind that we don't like him because he's such a prick, right? So when the striptease scene happens, and this is the scene of spectacle that I was referring to, because he's so shocked, like he's genuinely shocked, like, hang on, this looks so much like Susan, right? That it's like, so he's shocked, but he's shocked to the point that it isn't obvious to us, or I suppose the possibility doesn't occur to us that the fact that this woman who looks like his dead wife is working there is the reason he was there in the first place, right? He's just there. She comes out. This scene is so good because, I mean, obviously Marissa Mel is very attractive, so the striptease scene is fine, but the way it focuses on her, the music, it's just like this quintessential sleazy and stripteasey type music. But the level of shock and the focus on how shocked and surprised that George is in this scene, and the acting is excellent, right? Even from Jane as well. That it's like that you can see them both genuinely being like, hang on, this looks so much like Susan. Am I sure it's not Susan? But I'm sure she's dead, and all this stuff's happening. And the combination of the music, and I'm not sure if it does, but it almost feels like the music gets louder as it's happening. There's also that private investigator sitting there. Just the cinematography in this whole scene is so bloody effective, right? It's honestly just excellent. And so at this point, we probably should be like, well, this is... I mean, if it's not her, it's very, very silly because, maybe it's the only really unconvincing thing that happens in this film, as in it's quite unconvincing that it's a different person, but the unconvincing parts of it are that the way it tries to throw you off. So they have that conversation, and then after it, George is like to Jane, did you see her eyes? They were green or whatever. And Susan had brown eyes. So what it does, but at the same time, maybe this is effective. It's like, well, it's occurred to us, obviously, I would imagine that it's possible she would have contacts or whatever. But it's really... It gives you two very, very clear clues. Well... I mean, as in that's not exactly a clue, but it's a diversion. But the fact that he notes it is a clue for it alerts our minds to the possibility, right? And then later with the I can't remember the name of it, but the sleeping pills that he sees when he has the affair where he sleeps with her. It draws such attention to that fact only to draw us away by saying, it's for your friend, right? It's for your friend who comes over. That it's like, George, how silly of me to think that this woman who looks exactly like my wife might actually be my wife, right? It's very distracting. And I think it's a good method. So what's also distracting is, Monica Weston comes and has a chat to George and Jane, and she's sort of implying that like she thinks they want to pay to have sex with her, like a threesome or just George or something like that. And what I think is probably a really good effective thing about this scene is that she acts it so well, right? There's nothing about her that suggests she is doing some kind of undercover thing. Like she is acting completely differently to how Susan was, right? So I think the one part of the film that I have to discredit in this regard is that regardless of how well she's acting or the fact that, say, the private investigator later says that they're two different people, or George realizing in inverted commas that it can't be her or whatever. It's like, yeah, but how dumb are we, right? We know the kind of film that we're watching. Are we really going to be unconvinced that this is actually her? But nonetheless, I think it's very effective because she is a completely different person, right? She feels very high class, sort of wife of a fancy doctor at the start. Does Susan? She's coughing and whatever. And also, I think genuinely the hair, the difference in hair and slight difference in makeup and eyes makes her actually seem like a different person, right? Like, she's very much under the thumb. She sort of wears a very conservative clothing as Susan. Her eyes are a bit darker. It has this somber look, and just the framing of everything where she is, it's very depressed. It's very, what would you say, almost claustrophobic, I think, at times with the way they frame Susan's scenes at the start. And, it's a depressing sort of conservative, sad, I'm dying sort of vibe. And then suddenly when we go to Monica here, she's got different hairstyles. She's blonde. She is a striptease artist. She's just got that real casual way of talking, and I feel like she's chewing even at one point. She genuinely seems like a different person, and that's very, very convincing. So after all that, George and Jane have a chat about it, and then he sort of reveals, well, I came here because I saw a flyer or something like that, and it's like, well, but I couldn't believe it on the photo, but in person, she's so similar. So I don't think that explanation serves to make us feel like he's any better a person. I think because it's already seeped into our minds, as I mentioned just before. He's gone to this place without any, just in the middle of dinner with Jane, and it's so she's not good enough. Let's go, let's go talk to these naked women. But if there was any danger of us suddenly thinking, oh well, maybe he's not such a bad guy, or that maybe he cares about Jane, it's like, well, yeah, up until he decides that he is going to sleep with Monica Weston. So it's like the film just will not allow us to like him, because as much as Jane has a very cold way about her, there's still, like, when you assess what she's actually doing, aside from sleeping with a married man, I think overall we have enough sympathy towards her that we're like, George, can you stop being such a douchebag to her now? But, George is he's just sort of doing things, right? He's a bit lost. He doesn't seem particularly sad that his wife has died, but I sort of like this idea that, and I think this is a really key aspect of the film actually, that his wife has just died, and a big part of the problem with her was, or at least what we know about her, is that he very much neglected her. And this idea that, in order for him to have the motivation to have a degree of intimacy with his wife, she has to die, and then a more exciting striptease version of her has to appear in his life. And he's so shocked by this that he has to pay to sleep with her to basically test out whether it is her. Which I just find really, really cool, right, as a concept. So he finds himself, obviously, I imagine, extremely attracted to her as well, and I think part of it is the danger and the sort of, probably just the stripper aspect of it, right? So I think this is the best scene in the movie when they sleep together. The way that shot, when it's showing, it's sort of cutting between Monica and George's face, and George is, I think, topless by this point, and Monica probably is as well. It's got that sort of, it's the part of the theme that's very like, it's like question mark. I don't even know how to explain it, but it suggests like uncertainty, right? It's a bit frantic. George has just noticed the pills that really he thought belonged to Susan, and the whole thing's just like, it's uncertain, right? It's uncertain, it's sleazy, and then it leads to almost like this escape sex scene, right? It's like he's almost escaping from that sense of uncertainty. Like there's a degree of entrapment from this character, right? He's gone to this club because he's been made aware of her. He feels so uncertain by her that he has to sleep with her to test it out. She is not giving him anything. Like I assume he suspects that it's like her pretending to be someone else, but he's not completely certain. But regardless, he can sort of take back that degree of control of the situation by sleeping with her and testing it out for himself. So while he's about to do it, while they're about to approach each other, or they are approaching each other. He's looking over at the pills. He's like, geez. And this whole scene's excellent. And then the actual sex scene is lengthy and it's very well shot. You know, it's a real sexy scene, right? The music, it has that sort of that romp saxophone type theme in it. You know, it's very, very well written for the scene. And it's, as I said, it's lengthy, it's sexy, and it's like it's a satisfying moment in the film, but at the same time we still don't really know what the hell's happening. So in their post-coital state, suddenly, and this is another, I think, really effective strategy of the film, the way they sort of throw us off or attempt to throw us off, even though I think we deep down know realistically what's happening. That she really, really acts in this casual way, right? She's got that sort of almost twang to her voice, right? She's not necessarily from the fanciest part of town. She's sort of sitting there playing cards for some reason, and she gets a phone call, or no, there's a actually I think it's a phone call that she gets George to answer for some reason. In fact, no, that's from Jane. No, so there's a buzz at the door, and it's her other stripper hooker friend, I suppose, who comes and gets her pills, and then George is laughing like, oh, how silly of me. Oh, I thought that those pills that my dead wife had, that you have here, and you look exactly the same as my dead wife, I thought that suggests that you were the same people. So I think this is the strongest attempt from this scene to... It's like it's trying to prove once and for all, right, that he's, that it's definitely a different person. But if we've got any sense, we probably should know that that's not the case, right? Nonetheless, that's what happens. So, look, I don't know if it's worth so much. I might just go out of order of events here a little bit, and because I think obviously that the stuff between George and Susan/Monica is the most interesting stuff that's happening in this film. But there's, sorry, I'll draw away from that slightly, because I think it has to be noted that this is a very, as I said, that the sort of Columbo aspect or vibe of this film, I think it's got to be noted that the whole time we're building to a crescendo, but we don't know exactly what the crescendo is going to be. And I think the stuff that's happening outside of it is very interesting. And so there's that photographer friend who seems to know both George and Jane, and at multiple times he's taking very raunchy but weird pictures of that lady who he keeps putting insects on her parts. It's just a weird shot. A lot of weird scenes. So there's him. They use him to entrap Monica at one point in order to get information out of her. And see, what is so effective is that when a film that is investigative in nature is investigating with you, when it doesn't even attempt to display the possibility of what the actual outcome is, as long as all the strands of investigation that they're working on are relatively interesting and relatively convincing, I think it can seep in without you really noticing that there's another possibility, right? So they're desperate to try to get information out of Monica, but they've just got no idea that Henry's involved, right? Which is I think really cool. There are some scenes that involve Lucio Fulci as some kind of bloodstain specialist, I suppose. But in truth, all these other scenes are very much serve the purpose of distraction. So if you'll remember, there's the scene where there's that other the dental expert, right? And I think we know that George is innocent, but we think that presumably this dental expert is going to provide the proof. But the problem is he actually provides the proof that he's guilty, right? Because of the dental records. But again, that's just part of the great revelation when eventually it happens. I'll make a quick note of Lucio Fulci's acting, which obviously was never great, and eventually led to him playing himself in Cat in the Brain in 1990, which was probably a big mistake. Although he was a better actor by this point. He's very raw and young at this point, I think, and it's like there's some very, very unconvincing moments of him like pointing and nodding at a sheet in the background. It's like he evidently doesn't know what's happening. But so one other small criticism as well about this film is it doesn't really feel like a lot of time passes between him getting some kind of George getting some kind of conviction and just being on death row. To be fair, I think it might be that a lot of time passes. It's actually quite vague, and I think these slow, jazzy, saxophony type theme musics in films can often give that vibe of time passing, but it's not particularly clear. But also, this is when the film it really enters into social commentary vibes towards the end, which I think is really, really interesting. I think it's fantastic just how defeated and pathetic George becomes, right? He ends up stuck in this prison, and there's that scene, you know, it'll be the chair for you, buddy, or whatever it is from that cop at one point, which, you know, is just really, really cool. But you know, it's like reflected. It's reflective of this I guess stealing away, if you want to call it that, of George's power that he never really had in the first place, right? So I think the way he combines, I suppose, with Jane to try to investigate some information about Monica, it's like, okay, I think a big part of the giallo and even certain giallo and definitely like the film noir is the sense that the male protagonists have that degree of control, but they ultimately don't. And George starts off, he's the leader of this clinic, so he's rich and powerful, but he's also even got the ability to lie about how good he is. He can do a heart transplant. Then he feels like he's losing this control of his environment by this uncertainty around this striptease artist who, seems very much like his dead wife. But then he regains it, or he feels like he's regaining it by investigating. But then suddenly he's on death row, and it's like it's sort of totally at odds, I guess, with everything that he is expecting, right? That he's expecting to that he thinks that his life is. So I think we're about 75 minutes into the movie, and the music's all depressing and stuff. And Henry comes in to the jail, and it's interesting because I think the film is revealing to us just before the actual reveal that something is up here, because there hasn't really been a scene, I don't think, to this point where Henry is the focus. So it just sits on Henry, I think, longer than it should, and I think it's a bit of a pre-reveal that something serious is happening here. It's such a good scene, right? Now, as I said earlier, I think it just gets away with this almost childlike, or childish at least, need to explain his genius, right? And see, often this can happen in films like this because it's as much the film explaining the film's genius to us as it is someone within the film. But because it is sort of like evil genius, it sort of makes sense, I think, within the context of everything that's going on. So, I'll give the film that level of leeway. And also, I just think it's a damn good scene. Because I love the way it starts the revelation. It's a little bit jarring. So he's in there. He feigns. So Henry feigns a bit of sympathy, and evidently he doesn't feel any sympathy. George says he doesn't have anything to say. He's got no family, and he's like, I didn't kill her. And Henry's like, I know. But the tone initially isn't like, it's not, I know, right? It's not telling us immediately. And it's sort of a bit jarring for us. Now, it's extremely jarring for George. He takes a little while to realise that this is Henry revealing that he's in on the whole thing. He tells him that, your whole life was the clinic. You wouldn't have even been able to tell that Susan wasn't sick because you didn't pay any attention to her. So it's like, it's the film going, hey, look, we gave you all these clues back at the start of the film, right? And I think that's really, really cool. But the coolest thing about this scene is just him saying, oh, well, I'm gonna have the money to pay off, to pay everything off the clinic because of the insurance debt. It's like, hang on, but I thought the insurance was, was about George. But the particular part of it that I like is the way he goes, no one ever considered that I would benefit from that insurance money if you died. And I think it's genius, because I suspect the vast majority of the people in the audience wouldn't have made that connection either, right? It's as simple as wife dies, George gets the insurance. But it's the extension upon that, the one on top of the other of that. It's like, okay, yes, but by extension, if he's found guilty of that, then he will be sent to the gas chamber, and then Henry will get it. But it's like, it's a layer, it's an extra layer that wouldn't have occurred. And I think it's just convincing enough that wouldn't have occurred to the police either, I think, at least within the context of a movie. And the sheer enjoyment, right, that Henry gets out of mocking George in this way is just so satisfying, right? It's like he's talking about Susan. It's like, I always loved her, George, but that Susan has expensive taste, and that ultimately she was only really with George because he was the rich one. So she'll be happy to be with Henry because now he's the rich one, and he's got the exact same money. It's like everything in this scene. There's one slight part of it that you can feel is justified from Henry. Well, maybe not justified, but one part of it that you can accept, and that is that he seems genuinely like George has been a bit of a prick to him over the years. So you can understand the motivation, and the sort of the beautiful. What does he say? I think he says it's. He says that it's not sickness, it's madness, right? Sorry, it's not hatred, it's madness, right? And then, but a brilliant madness. Like, he's so happy. He's like, even if you're gonna call me mad, I'm still going to win this, right? Every part of it is satisfying. Every part of it is genius. So, I think that the cool thing about that is one of the cool things about this scene is the revelation that she's not even dead, right? And that's the part of it that that George can't get his head around, and partly why George is so ignorant to everything that's going on, that he's like, no, but this doesn't make sense because she died. It's like, no, but she didn't die, George. You're not getting it, right? And this is another part, like, not only has the wool been pulled over his eyes, but even when the revelation's happening, so impotent is he in his supposed sort of masculine position of power that it was that all that was an illusion, right? Like, he just can't. He is just this impotent, now death-bound person in jail with his brother, who was basically his subordinate, is now getting this unbelievable revenge on him. And because he was so ignorant to the possibility of that, there's nothing he can do about it, in theory. So, yeah, and within that, he even explains all of the things from the start of the movie, and it's being superimposed with the actual images, and it's Henry saying to George, look how genius I am, but it's also the movie saying to us, look at how genius we are. So soon after, or I think it's either soon after or maybe even during, but I think it's soon after, that we see her changing back, right? We see stripper Monica revealing to us that she is actually Susan, as she has been the whole time. And I think that the main theme is playing while it's going on, which is pretty cool. It's very, very satisfying. And then, outside of what's happening with Henry and Susan, the film gives us like a degree of sympathy for George, right? Finally, he's absolutely despairing, and he's hoping that something's going to come up, but the film does not want us to be too caring of George, right? As I said earlier, this film isn't about main protagonists getting what they want or good guys not dying. Even though the result is that a less bad guy doesn't die, you are not meant to go, yes, which is done by the sort of methodical nature of the ending. So I'll make brief mention here. I'll just jump back a little bit in the film of the guy. What's his name? Just let me get a list here. Benjamin, I think. Benjamin is this pathetic character who's obviously like a client of stripper Monica or hooker Monica. And there's this scene from earlier where, and again, it's like, so this is where it's like, okay, so if the male protagonist, George, isn't in control, maybe the femme fatale is in control, right? And the scene, the lengthy scene with her and Benjamin earlier she's in complete control, right? By his love of of her, and the fact that she's pretty much bored by him. Like, she gets some amount of money from him, but he wants to take her away. He wants to pay her bail, but she knows that he can't because he's not really got that much money. So he's a character without any power. But then there's that moment where I think it's, if you ever leave me or you ever left me, I'd kill you or something. And it's probably, I mean, it's a great and important moment in the film. If there's one thing I'm critical of, it's that, unfortunately, I think the way it's put together, it's actually very clear that it is going to happen, right? Even though, which sort of unfortunately means that it feels as though the very existence of George is literally just for of Benjamin, is literally just for the purpose of the end scene. But nonetheless, I'm okay with that because, again, it still falls within this structure of pretty much like every moment of this film being relevant to something, there being no fluff. So we see the scene with like as I said, with Monica demonicering herself and becoming Susan again, and we see Henry on the plane, and I think this is sort of cut between this sort of news report of the situation with the gas chamber, and I think call it gas chamber or whatever it is. I think that's more like a I can't think of the word, but it's not the exact what it is. But nonetheless, we do get into full social commentary mode here, and I believe that the prison that they shoot, I think this is an actual prison. I think they're actually shooting like reality here, because I've looked this up and I've read about it before, which seems quite amazing, and it's like, so there's something beyond just the confines of this film going about the efficacy and necessity or not of the death penalty. And clearly this scene or this movie is suggesting that the death penalty is problematic, obviously, because that people who are innocent can be killed. But this is the last images of the film, the last few scenes, really reflect what this movie, it's the disdain it almost holds for its characters, right? So it's worth mentioning Jane is basically subject to, she's been sad that George is going to be put to death, and the photographers put her to sleep with some kind of pill, and when she wakes up, it's after. We don't get the reaction to her, so she's made redundant and irrelevant, and this is very much something that happens in a lot of giallo films, right? And I think with the better ones, it's not that they were forgotten about, it's that they're treated with disdain, right, a lot of the time. So she's irrelevant. Then there's we've seen the scenes of Monica and what's his name, Henry, meeting up with each other. Monica is Susan, and Henry, they meet each other up with each other, and they get about 5 seconds of enjoyment, and then Benjamin, they're made in Paris, and then Benjamin's there. It's not made clear how he knew, but whatever. Benjamin's there, he's like, Monica, and then he shoots them both dead, and it's nothing. We barely get a reaction from them. They're just dead. Benjamin's just sad, but he's got that expression of I had to do this type thing. So that's the end of them. Just done, characters gone, whatever, emotionless. And then the fascinating end to the film, of which we've already seen a little bit by this point, but it completes it with this, that we don't get to see George be happy that he survived. We don't get to see George at all. And it's just disengaging us from it. And it's brilliant. I think this scene is so good right? So he's explaining the situation. The reporter, he's taking us through the death penalty or the killing process. He's talking about this is some of the best suspense building ever, because I don't know if like the implication of this scene is that maybe we already, like the news broadcaster that this is on has already revealed that he didn't die, but we're just sort of in it. So he's sort of retroactively explaining everything that happened. He says that there was a shooting in Paris, and I think the times are a bit vague, but then they talk about the time difference, which meant that the executioner or the governor, I think, got a call, and then the execution was called off. And then the reporter says, we're reporting with whoever, and walks off, and then the music do, and it's like, that's it? There's no moment for us to reflect or, oh wow, George survived, yay, because the film doesn't want us to like George. It doesn't want us to like anyone. And I think this is, it's so damn good, right? That scene, it's so good because the suspense, but the thing is, as much as George doesn't want to die, so we don't want George to die, and obviously he doesn't either. It almost feels like it wouldn't have been the biggest disaster ever. Like, obviously he didn't deserve to, but at the same time, he's not very nice, and less bad people than him get killed. There was that nice nurse who got killed earlier in the movie. That it's like the extent to which the film. So obviously the thing about the murder mystery is that it's all about that, right? Murder mystery films are all about the murder mystery. So we've got the answer to the murder mystery slightly earlier in that it didn't actually happen. And then it shifts to, well, did the goddamn protagonist survive or not? And it builds us into this level of suspense that's almost unbearable. Like, well, did he? Because given us all the evidence and all the revelation from that reporter, he's just not clear until very much at the end. But when it happens, it's just methodical, right? It's like it's not emotional. It's given us the information, and then it's just left us, and the movie has ended. And it's rather unique. It's quite surprising, I think. It was very jarring the first time I watched it. I was like, oh, okay, yep, so he survived. And then you're like, yep, cool. But the film doesn't want you to be happy about it. It doesn't necessarily want you to be anything about it, right? It's like, this is the life of these bad, ordinary people. You live or you die, whatever. Henry and Susan die, whatever. And George either got executed or he didn't, whatever. We'll give you the information, but we don't want you to feel anything about it. And I think that is a perfect way to end it. I'll transition to a preview of the next podcast, which is perfectly about a lack of feelings, because I must say, and this is probably silly of me, it hadn't actually occurred to me before the significance of the title of A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, right? And that's this idea, obviously, that lizards are unfeeling. So I think the best thing about this title, but I'll leave this for the actual podcast, is that it reveals the end in the title, which is so brilliant. But nonetheless, this has been the 10th episode of the Italian Horror Guy. It's currently the 28th. I think I'll probably release it either today or tomorrow. I think the schedule from now on is going to be that it's a weekly show released on Sunday. So the Lizard in a Woman's Skin episode will be released on Sunday, and I'll record that over the next couple of days, and I cannot wait to do that. I also can't wait for you to join me for that and for future episodes of the show. I'm really, really enjoying it. And yeah, this has been the Italian Horror Guy, episode 10, do join me for episode 11. Thanks very much, guys.